Hello and welcome to our channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Tonight we invite you to step into the fog-laden streets of Victorian London, where gas lamps flicker and mysteries lurk in every shadow. Join Dr. John Watson as he recounts a chilling case from the annals of Sherlock Holmes, the death of the banker in Whitechapel. Chapter 1. A Knock at 221B. Hello and welcome to our channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Tonight we invite you to step into the fog-laden streets of Victorian London, where gas lamps flicker and mysteries lurk in every shadow. Join me, Dr. John Watson, as I recount a chilling case from the annals of Sherlock Holmes, the death of the banker in Whitechapel. It was a dreary November evening in 1888, the kind that seemed to wrap London in a shroud of mist and melancholy. The fog was so thick that the gas lamps along Baker Street cast only feeble halos, their lights swallowed by the swirling haze. I sat by the fire in our rooms at 221B, attempting to distract myself with the latest issue of The Lancet, though my thoughts were continually drawn to the mournful strains of Sherlock Holmes's violin. He stood by the window, his tall, lean figure a sharp silhouette against the dim glow of the street below, his bow gliding across the strings in a slow, haunting melody. The notes seemed to weave themselves into the very fabric of the fog, as if Holmes were summoning the spirit of London itself. The fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows across the cluttered room. Books piled precariously on every surface, chemical apparatus glinting in the corner, and Holmes's pipe rack standing sentinel by his armchair. I confess I found the atmosphere oppressive, the weight of the fog and the ceaseless patter of rain against the panes, conspiring to unsettle my nerves. I glanced at Holmes, hoping for some remark to break the silence, but he was lost in his music, his eyes half closed, his mind no doubt wandering through the labyrinth of his own thoughts. Sleeplessness or grief. His dark overcoat was damp from the fog, and his hands trembled as he clutched a crumpled letter, its edges frayed as if it had been handled repeatedly. He stood hesitantly in the doorway, his gaze darting between Holmes and myself, as though unsure whether to trust the sanctuary of our rooms. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he began, his voice quavering like a taut wire. "I am in desperate need of your assistance. My brother, Edward Hawthorne, a banker of some repute in the city, was found dead this morning in Whitechapel. Murdered, they say, in a most brutal fashion. The police are at a loss, and I fear the truth will be buried with him unless you intervene." Holmes gestured to the armchair opposite his own. "Pray, take a seat, Mr. Hawthorne, and tell us all. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem. The smallest fact may prove the linchpin of the matter." Reginald sank into the chair, his shoulders sagging as though the weight of his tale pressed upon him. I took my place at the writing desk, ready to note down the particulars, for I knew Holmes valued my records, however much he might jest about their romantic embellishments. Mrs. Hudson returned with a tray of tea, her presence a quiet comfort in the tense atmosphere, and then withdrew, closing the door softly behind her. Reginald took a sip of tea, steadying himself, and began his story. "My brother Edward was a man of habit, Mr. Holmes, a creature of precision. He was 45, unmarried, and devoted to his work at the City Bank, where he managed accounts for some of London's wealthiest families. He was not the sort to make enemies, or so I thought. But in recent weeks he had grown anxious, secretive even. He spoke of debts unpaid and a shadow following him, though he would not elaborate. I attributed it to the strain of his profession, but now I fear it was something far darker. He paused, his fingers tightening around the letter. This morning, a constable came to my door with the news. Edward was found in an alley off Commerce. Black ink. The paper bore the faint scent of tobacco, and at the bottom, sealed with red wax, was the same symbol Reginald had described, a triangle inscribed within a circle. Holmes held the letter to the light, his magnifying glass appearing as if by magic in his hand. "Mr. Hawthorne," he read aloud, his voice low and deliberate. "The debt is due. The order will not be denied. Meet me at the appointed place or the consequences will be dire. It is unsigned, but the wax seal is telling. This is no ordinary correspondence, Watson. The symbol suggests a ritualistic element, perhaps a secret society." I felt a chill, not from the fog pressing against the windows, but from the implications of Holmes's words. "A secret society?" I asked. "In Whitechapel?" "Precisely," Holmes replied, his gaze still fixed on the letter. "The triangle within a circle is not a common mark. It may denote an organization with specific aims, financial, political, or even occult. Mr. Hawthorne, tell me of this key you mentioned." Reginald produced a small brass key from his waistcoat pocket, its surface worn but sturdy. This was also found on Edward's person. It unlocks a safe in his office at the Citibank. I have not yet inspected its contents, fearing what I might find. Edward was meticulous about his privacy, and I suspect whatever is in that safe may explain his death. Holmes turned the key over in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Then we shall begin there. But first, Mr. Hawthorne, describe your brother's habits in greater detail. Did he frequent Whitechapel? Had he enemies in the city? And these debts, were they financial or something more personal?" Reginald recounted Edward's routine. A man of solitary habits, rarely seen outside his office or his modest home in Bloomsbury. He had no known enemies, though his reserved nature made him few friends. The mention of debts, however, seemed to trouble Reginald deeply. "Edward was wealthy," he said, "but he hinted at obligations that went beyond money. He once mentioned a burden have overlooked." I hesitated, the thought of Whitechapel's grim streets unsettling me. "Tonight, Holmes? In this fog?" "Especially in this fog," he replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It is in the shadows that truth hides. Come, old friend, the game is afoot." As we prepared to leave, Holmes paused by the mantel, slipping the letter and key into his pocket. The firelight caught his profile, casting sharp angles across his face, and for a moment I saw the relentless hunter beneath the scholar. Whatever lay ahead in Whitechapel, I knew Holmes would pursue it with the tenacity of a bloodhound. The fog enveloped us as we stepped into the night, the gas lamps barely piercing the gloom. London seemed a city of phantoms, and I could not shake the feeling that we were about to uncover a darkness far deeper than the fog itself. Chapter 2. The Banker's Last Hours. The fog that cloaked London that November night of 1888 seemed to thicken as our hansom cab rattled toward Whitechapel. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones and the occasional bark of a stray dog were the only sounds piercing the oppressive silence. Sherlock Holmes sat beside me, his face half hidden by the brim of his deerstalker, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the cab's window. I knew that look. His mind was already dissecting the case, piecing together fragments of evidence as a composer might weave notes into a symphony. My own thoughts, however, were less ordered, troubled by the grim reputation of Whitechapel, where shadows seemed to harbor menace in every alley. We alighted near Commercial Street, the air damp and heavy with the stench of refuse and coal smoke. The gas lamps cast feeble pools of light, their glow swallowed by the fog, which swirled like a living thing around the crumbling tenements and narrow passages. Holmes led the way with his usual brisk stride, his long coat flapping like a raven's wings. I kept my revolver close, its weight a small comfort against the unseen dangers of this notorious district. The alley where Edward Hawthorne had met his cobblestones were slick with damp, but Holmes's keen gaze missed nothing. "Here," he said, pointing to a faint scuff mark near the outline. "A struggle, brief but desperate. The angle suggests Hawthorne was facing his attacker. And this." His fingers plucked a tiny fragment of green silk from a jagged brick protruding from the alley wall. He held it to the light, its sheen catching the lantern's glow. "Green silk," I remarked, peering over his shoulder. "From a scarf, perhaps? Or a cuff, a lining, or even a handkerchief," Holmes replied, slipping the fragment into a small envelope. "It is not the sort of material one expects in Whitechapel's alleys. Our banker was not alone, Watson, and his companion was no common ruffian." Lestrade snorted, though his curiosity was piqued. "A scrap of cloth? That's hardly evidence, Mr. Holmes." "Evidence is what we make of it," Holmes retorted, rising to his feet. "This alley has more to tell us, but first we must see the banker's office. The key Mr. Reginald Hawthorne provided may unlock more than a safe." We left the alley, the fog closing in behind us like a curtain, and took a cab to the City Bank, a grand edifice of stone and iron in the heart of London's financial district. The contrast with Whitechapel could not have been starker. Here, the streets were wider, the gas lamps brighter, and the air carried the faint tang of ink and polished wood rather than decay. The bank's night watchman, a grizzled fellow named Perkins, admitted us with a skeptical glance, but the key from Edward's pocket ensured our entry to his private office. The room was a study in order, its mahogany desk polished to a mirror shine, its shelves lined with ledgers and files. A portrait of a stern-faced man, presumably Edward Hawthorne, hung above the fireplace, his eyes seeming to follow us as we moved. Holmes wasted no time, striding to the safe embedded in the wall behind the desk. The brass key turned smoothly in the lock, and the heavy door swung open with a faint creak. Inside we found a single ledger, its leather cover worn but intact, and a sealed letter bearing the same triangle within a circle. Annotations suggest a pattern of coercion. "Look here. CL, third demand, 500 guineas. This is blackmail, or something very like it." I frowned, studying the ledger over his shoulder. Blackmail? But for what? Edward Hawthorne seemed a man of impeccable reputation. "Reputations are masks, Watson," Holmes said, his voice low. "And masks are made to be removed. This CL holds the key to our mystery, but the symbol, the triangle within a circle, suggests a larger design. It is not merely a personal vendetta but an organized effort, perhaps a secret society with influence beyond Whitechapel." I felt a chill, recalling the sinister implications of the letter. A secret society in London. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that signaled a challenge. London is a city of secrets, old friend. Its clubs, its guilds, its hidden cabals, they thrive in the shadows of respectability. This order may be one such group, and Edward Hawthorne's death was a warning to others who defy them. He closed the ledger with a snap and tucked it under his arm. We shall take this to Baker Street for further study. The letter, too, must be analyzed. The wax, the paper, the ink, all may yield clues. But first, let us return to the alley. I suspect the police overlooked something in their haste to blame a phantom killer. We left the bank, the ledger and letter safely stowed in Holmes's satchel, and returned to Whitechapel. The fog had thickened, if such a thing were possible, and the alley seemed even more foreboding under the weight of night. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern sweeping the ground once more. Near the spot where the silk fragment had been found, he paused, his fingers brushing the cobblestones. Here, he said, extracting a small metallic object, a cufflink, engraved with the initials C.L. By Jove, Holmes, I exclaimed. This could belong to our man. Or it could be another breadcrumb meant to mislead, Holmes cautioned, slipping the cufflink in, feeling that we had stepped into a web far larger and more dangerous than I had imagined. Holmes leaned back in the cab, his eyes half closed, but I knew his mind was racing. The banker's last hours were not spent in idleness, Watson, he said at last. He was drawn to Whitechapel, to that alley, by someone he feared. The symbol, the payments, the order, they point to a conspiracy that reaches into the heart of London's wealth and power. Tomorrow, we shall follow the trail of C.L. and see where it leads. The fog pressed against the cab's windows, a silent reminder of the mysteries yet to be unraveled. I clutched my revolver, grateful for its solid weight, and prepared myself for the dangers that awaited us in the shadowed streets of Victorian London. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Fog. The fog that enveloped London on that November night in 1888 seemed to grow denser with each step we took, as if conspiring to shield the secrets of Whitechapel from our prying eyes. Sherlock Holmes and I had left the grim alley where Edward Hawthorne met his end, our minds burdened with the weight of the ledger, the cryptic letter, the green silk fragment, and the cufflink marked C.L. The hansom cab's wheels clattered over the cobblestones, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant wail of a foghorn and the occasional shout of a street vendor braving the night. Holmes sat beside me, his profile sharp against the dim glow of passing gas lamps, his silence a sure sign that his thoughts were racing ahead, piecing together the fragments of this perplexing case. Whitechapel is a labyrinth, Watson, he remarked at last, his voice cutting through the muffled sounds of the city. But even labyrinths have patterns, if one knows where to look. Our next step is to trace Edward Hawthorne's movements before his death. A man of his station does not wander into such a district without purpose. I nodded, though the thought of delving deeper into Whitechapel's shadowed streets filled me with unease. The district's reputation for violence, amplified by the recent horrors attributed to a certain unnamed fiend, cast a pall over our air was heavy with the scent of stale ale and sweat, a stark contrast to the polished order of Edward Hawthorne's office. Holmes, undeterred by the rough company, scanned the room with his hawk-like gaze, his attention settling on a barmaid wiping down a counter with a rag that had seen better days. "Excuse me, madam," Holmes said, his tone polite but firm as he approached her. "We seek information about a gentleman who may have visited this establishment last night. A Mr. Edward Hawthorne, a banker, well-dressed, perhaps out of place here. The barmaid, a woman of perhaps 30, with tired eyes and a guarded expression, paused in her work. "A banker, you say?" "Aye, I remember him. Came in late, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Kept his coat collar up, like he didn't want to be noticed. Sat in that corner there." She nodded toward a shadowed booth. "With another fellow, cloaked and hooded. Queer sort, that one. Had a limp and a beard, and I swear I saw a tattoo on his wrist when he reached for his drink. A triangle-like, with a circle round it." Holmes's eyes gleamed, though his face remained impassive. "A tattoo, you say? Most intriguing. Can you describe this cloaked man further?" She shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Tall, broad-shouldered, but the hood hid most of his face. He spoke low, like he didn't want to be overheard." The banker looked frightened, kept glancing at the door. They left together, not long before closing. "Did you overhear anything of their conversation?" Holmes pressed, slipping a shilling onto the counter. The barmaid pocketed the coin with a practiced motion. "Not much. Something about debts and the order." The banker said, "I've paid enough," and the other one laughed. A cold, nasty sound. "That's all I caught." Holmes nodded, his mind clearly racing. "And did you notice anything they left behind? A paper, a belonging, anything at all?" She thought for a moment, then signature. "The question is, to whom is it addressed?" We thanked the barmaid and stepped back into the fog, the tavern's warmth quickly replaced by the chill of the night. The docks were alive with the creak of moored ships and the distant shouts of stevedores, but the fog muffled all sound, creating an eerie sense of isolation. Holmes paused by a gas lamp, its light casting a halo around him as he examined the cigar stub once more. "This tattoo interests me," he said, his voice thoughtful. "A triangle within a circle, prominently displayed. It suggests allegiance, perhaps even fanaticism. The order, whatever it may be, uses this mark to bind its members, or to intimidate its victims." I shivered, pulling my coat tighter. "Do you think this cloaked man is our killer?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Possibly, though I suspect he is but one thread in a larger web. Edward Hawthorne's fear, his secretive payments to CL, the symbol carved into his flesh, all point to a conspiracy that extends beyond a single man. We must tread carefully, Watson. The Order may be watching us even now." As if in response, a shadow flickered at the edge of the gaslight's glow, too quick to identify. I gripped my revolver, my heart quickening, but Holmes raised a hand, signaling caution. "Not yet, Watson. Let them think us unaware. Observation is our weapon." We moved on, following the barmaid's vague description of the cloaked man's path. The trail led us through a maze of alleys, each narrower and more oppressive than the last. The fog seemed to cling to us, its tendrils curling around our ankles like a living thing. At one point, Holmes stopped abruptly, his lantern illuminating a muddy footprint on the cobblestones. A man's boot, large, with a slight irregularity suggesting a limp. "Our cloaked friend," Holmes murmured, sketching the print in his notebook. "The limp is real, not feigned. This may help us identify him, should we cross his path again." The trail ended at a boarded-up warehouse, its windows dark and its "Is our next link, Watson," he said as the cab rattled toward Baker Street. He is either the killer or a messenger for those who orchestrated Hawthorne's death. Tomorrow we shall seek him out, and with him the truth about this order. Back in the warmth of 221B, I sat by the fire, my notebook open as I recorded the night's events. Holmes paced the room, the cigar stub and ledger laid out on the table before him. The fog pressed against the windows, a silent reminder of the dangers lurking in London's shadows. I could not shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the order's reach extended even to our sanctuary. As the fire crackled and the clock ticked toward midnight, I glanced at Holmes, his face half lit by the glow of the lamp. "What do you make of it all, Holmes?" I asked. "This order, these symbols, are we dealing with a criminal gang or something more sinister?" Holmes paused, his eyes distant. "Sinister, Watson, but not in the way you imagine. This is no mere gang, but a network with purpose. Perhaps financial, perhaps ideological. Edward Hawthorne was a pawn in their game, and his death was a move calculated to inspire fear. But fear is a poor strategist, and we shall exploit its weaknesses." I nodded, though my mind was heavy with questions. Who was C.L.? What did the order want? And why had Edward Hawthorne, a man of wealth and respectability, met his end in a Whitechapel alley? As I penned these thoughts, I knew that only Holmes could unravel the threads of this mystery, and I resolved to follow him, wherever the shadows might lead. Chapter 4. The Ledger's Secret. The pale light of dawn filtered through the fog-stained windows of 221B Baker Street, casting a muted glow over the cluttered room. It was the morning following our nocturnal venture into Whitechapel, and the events of the night, the grim alley, the tavern, the cigar stub, and the elusive cloaked figure, lingered in my mind like the remnants of a troubling dream. The fire in the grate crackled softly, a comforting counterpoint to the chill that still C.L. and the letter with its menacing seal. "Watson," Holmes said at last, his voice breaking the silence. "This ledger is no mere record of transactions. It is a map of Edward Hawthorne's fears, a chronicle of his entanglement with forces he could neither control nor escape." I set down my tea, intrigued. "You found something, then?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that signaled a breakthrough. Indeed, the entries at first glance appeared to be routine banking records, deposits, withdrawals, interest calculations. But look here. He pointed to a series of annotations written in Edward's meticulous hand, beside payments to C.L. The sums were substantial, ranging from hundreds to thousands of guineas, and were recorded at irregular intervals over the past year. "These are not payments for services or loans," Holmes continued. "They are tributes, extorted under duress. Note the phrasing: C.L. second demand, C.L. final warning. This is the language of coercion." I leaned closer, studying the ledger. The entries were indeed cryptic, with dates that corresponded to significant financial transactions at the Citibank. One entry, dated a week before Edward's death, read, "C.L. 1,000 guineas per order's decree." Another, more troubling, noted, "Refused further payment, consequences imminent." I felt a chill, recalling the letter's warning. The circle closes. "Blackmail, then," I said. "But for what?" Edward Hawthorne was a man of impeccable reputation, or so his brother claimed. Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Reputations, Watson, are like the fog outside. easily conjured, easily dispelled. Edward Hawthorne was hiding something, and this ledger holds the key. But there is more. He turned to a page near the back where a series of numbers and letters were scrawled in a different ink, less orderly than the rest. This is a cipher, a visionaire cipher to be precise. It requires a keyword to decode, but the pattern is unmistakable. I watched fascinated as Holmes try. He wrote the word triad and began applying it to the cipher. The result was swift and startling. A decoded message that read, "Meeting at Spitalfields, midnight, 7th November. CL demands final payment. Orders will unbreakable." I stared at the words, my heart quickening. Spitalfields, I said. That's not far from Whitechapel. And the date, 7th November, was the night before his death. Holmes nodded, his expression grim. Precisely. Edward Hawthorne went to Spitalfields to meet CL, likely under duress. The meeting ended in his murder, and the symbol carved into his palm was a message, a warning to others who might defy the order. I leaned back, my mind racing. This order, what could it be? A criminal syndicate? A cult? Holmes rose and began pacing, his hands clasped behind his back. It is too early to say, Watson, but the symbol, the payments, the secrecy, all suggest an organization with structure and purpose. It may be financial, leveraging blackmail to control men like Hawthorne. Or it may be ideological, bound by some arcane ritual. The triangle within a circle is not a common emblem. It suggests a blend of geometry and mysticism, perhaps rooted in Masonic or occult traditions. I shivered, the thought of such a group operating in the heart of London unsettling me. And CL, could he be the leader of this order? Possibly, Holmes said, pausing by the window. The fog outside was thinning, revealing glimpses of Baker Street's cobblestones and the occasional passerby. But more likely a lieutenant, an enforcer. The cufflink we found suggests carelessness, not leadership. A true mastermind would not leave such a trace. He returned to the table, picking up the ledger once more. There is another clue here, Watson. The payments to CL correspond to specific transactions at the Citibank, large transfers to anonymous accounts routed through shell companies. Edward Hawthorne was not merely paying blackmail. He was facilitating something larger, perhaps money laundering. Order is cautious, but not infallible. We shall go at dusk, when the fog offers cover but the streets are not yet deserted. He sat again, spreading out a map of London and marking the Spitalfields location with a pencil. In the meantime, we must analyze the physical evidence. The green silk, the cigar stub, the cufflink. Each may tell us more about our cloaked man and his associates. The silk, for instance, is of fine quality, likely imported. I shall send it to my chemist friend, Mr. Bell, for analysis. The cigar band, too, may yield the name of a tobacconist who caters to a select clientele. I marveled at his methodical approach, each step a thread in the tapestry of his reasoning. "And the letter?" I asked, gesturing to the sealed note with its ominous symbol. Holmes picked it up, holding it to the light. The wax is of a particular composition, likely beeswax mixed with a red pigment. The paper is high quality, watermarked with a faint crest, possibly that of a private stationer. I shall make inquiries. Every detail, Watson, is a stepping stone to the truth. As he spoke, the clock struck 9, its chime a reminder of the world moving on outside our rooms. The street noises, vendors calling, cabs clattering, filtered through the window, grounding us in the rhythm of London. Yet the ledger, with its ciphered secrets, seemed to pull us into a darker realm, one where shadows held sway. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "We tread a dangerous path, Watson. The Order will not take kindly to our interference. But their arrogance, leaving symbols, dropping cufflinks, will be their undoing. We shall unravel their web, thread by thread." I nodded, though my heart was heavy with foreboding. The cozy glow of 221B, with its fire and familiar clutter, felt like a fragile bulwark against the menace we faced. I took up my pen, recording Holmes's deductions, knowing that each word brought us closer to a confrontation with the Order. As the fog outside began to lift, revealing the gray sprawl of London, I could not shake the feeling that we were being drawn deeper into a game. Lean inward, as if conspiring to block out the fading light. The air was thick with the mingled scents of coal smoke, rotting refuse, and the faint tang of the nearby Thames. Gas lamps flickered weakly, their light swallowed by the fog, and the clatter of hooves and distant shouts of costermongers provided a restless backdrop. Holmes moved with purpose, his long stride eating up the distance as we approached the address from the ledger, a derelict warehouse tucked behind a row of crumbling shops. The building loomed before us, its boarded windows like blind eyes staring into the fog. The door, secured with a rusty chain, showed signs of recent disturbance. Fresh scratches on the lock and a faint scuff of mud on the threshold. Holmes knelt to examine the marks, his lantern casting stark shadows across his angular face. "Someone has been here within the last day," he murmured, his fingers tracing the scratches. "The mud is still damp, and the chain has been tampered with. We are not the first to seek this place, Watson." I glanced around, the fog pressing close, muffling sound and sight. "Could it be the cloaked man from the tavern?" I asked, recalling the barmaid's description of the bearded figure with the telltale tattoo. "Possibly," Holmes replied, rising to his feet. "Or another agent of the Order. Let us proceed with caution." He produced a small tool from his pocket, a lockpick, I noted with a mix of admiration and unease, and set to work on the chain. Within moments, the lock clicked open, and the door creaked inward, revealing a cavernous interior shrouded in darkness. The warehouse was a maze of crates and barrels, their shapes looming like specters in the dim light of Holmes's lantern. The air was heavy with the musty scent of damp wood and old tar, and the faint drip of water echoed somewhere in the distance. We moved silently, Holmes's eyes scanning every surface for clues. Near the center of the warehouse, a stack of crates had been disturbed, some toppled as if in haste. Holmes paused, his lantern illuminating a faint trail, the world to a blur of gray shapes and muffled sounds. Running footsteps, the clatter of a dropped crate, the distant shout of a watchman. The chase led us deeper into Whitechapel, where the alleys grew narrower and the air more oppressive. My lungs burned with the effort, but Holmes seemed tireless, his focus absolute. At one point the figure stumbled and something metallic glinted as it fell to the cobblestones. Holmes swooped down without breaking stride, snatching up a silver ring engraved with the now familiar triangle within a circle symbol. "Keep going, Watson," he shouted, tucking the ring into his pocket as he sprinted onward. The figure ducked into a courtyard flanked by crumbling tenements, its walls slick with damp. For a moment we lost sight of him in the fog, but Holmes's keen senses guided us. He paused at the courtyard's edge, his lantern sweeping the ground. "He's gone to ground," he whispered, his breath visible in the chill air. But not far. We searched the courtyard, its shadows deep and treacherous. A creaking gate at the far end suggested an escape route, but as we approached, the fog seemed to swallow all trace of our quarry. Holmes examined the gate, noting a fresh scrape on its hinges. "He passed through here," he said, "but the fog is his ally. We shall not catch him tonight." I caught my breath, my revolver still in hand, the weight of it a reminder of the danger we faced. "That ring," I said, nodding toward Holmes's pocket. "It's another piece of the puzzle, isn't it?" Holmes produced the ring, holding it to the lantern's light. Its silver surface was intricately engraved, and inside the band an inscription read, "Loyalty to the Order." "Indeed, Watson," he said, his voice grim. "This is no mere trinket. It is a badge of allegiance, worn by those bound to the Order's cause. Our cloaked man is a member, perhaps a low-ranking one, given his carelessness in dropping it." I frowned, the implications sinking in. "But why flee? If the Order is as powerful as you suspect, why not confront us?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Because he is a messenger, not a master trap. But the name is a lead, and we shall follow it." As we left the warehouse, the fog seemed to press closer, its tendrils curling around us like a living thing. The distant wail of a foghorn and the creak of a passing cart were the only sounds. Yet I could not shake the feeling that we were being watched. Holmes, too, was alert, his head turning at every shadow, his hand resting lightly on the handle of his stick. Back in our cab, as we rattled toward Baker Street, I reflected on the night's events. The chase had been exhilarating but fruitless, the hooded figure vanishing like a phantom. Yet the silver ring, with its ominous inscription, was a tangible link to the Order, and the name Crane offered a new thread to pursue. Holmes sat in silence, his eyes half closed, but I knew his mind was racing, weaving the clues into a pattern only he could see. "This Order is no mere gang, Watson," he said at last, his voice low. "They are organized, disciplined, and ruthless. The ring, the symbol, the payments to CL, all point to a network with influence and purpose. Edward Hawthorne was a pawn in their game, and his death was a calculated move to protect their secrets." I nodded, though my heart was heavy with foreboding. "And the cloaked man? Do you think he's the killer?" Holmes shook his head. "Unlikely. His flight suggests fear, not guilt. The killer is someone with precision, perhaps surgical skill, given the nature of Hawthorne's wound. The cloaked man is a cog in the machine, but not the hand that struck the blow." As we approached Baker Street, the fog began to lift, revealing glimpses of the city's familiar contours. Yet the mysteries we faced seemed only to deepen, each clue leading to more questions. Who was Crane? What was the Order's true aim? And how had a respectable banker become entangled in their web? Back in 221B, Holmes laid the ring on the table beside the ledger, the cigar stub, and the silk fragment. The fire cast a warm glow over the room, but its ring inscribed with "Loyalty to the Order," and the name Crane scrawled on the scrap of paper found in the Spitalfields warehouse. The events of the previous night, the chase through Whitechapel's alleys, the fleeting glimpse of the hooded figure, and the growing shadow of the mysterious Order, had left me restless, my mind a whirl of questions. Holmes, however, was as focused as ever, his lean figure striding purposefully through the damp streets, his eyes alight with the thrill of the hunt. Our destination was the Pall Mall Club, a bastion of London's elite, where Holmes had traced the origin of the silver ring through his network of informants. The jeweler who crafted it, a discreet craftsman in Hatton Garden, had revealed that the ring was commissioned by a Mr. Charles Langley, a wealthy merchant and member of the club. The name CL matched the initials in Edward Hawthorne's ledger, and Holmes was eager to confront this potential lead, though he cautioned me against premature conclusions. "The order is cunning, Watson," he had said as we left Baker Street. "They scatter clues like breadcrumbs, some leading to truth, others to deception. We must tread carefully." The Pall Mall Club was a world apart from the squalor of Whitechapel. Its grand facade of Portland stone loomed over the street, its windows aglow with the soft light of chandeliers. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood, cigar smoke, and old leather, and the murmur of cultured voices filled the oak-paneled rooms. Gentlemen in tailored suits lounged in armchairs, discussing politics and commerce over glasses of brandy, their conversations punctuated by the clink of glassware and the rustle of newspapers. The atmosphere was one of refined comfort, yet I felt a prickle of unease, as if the order's shadow reached even here. We were directed to a private room where Charles Langley awaited. He was a man of about 50, portly and florid, with a neatly trimmed beard and a manner that suggested both confidence and unease. His eyes darted to us as we entered, and his hand tightened around his glass, betraying a nervous energy. Holmes introduced us with his usual courtesy, though his gaze was sharp. "Missy, that ring was stolen from me months ago," he said quickly. "I reported it to the police, though they did little about it. I have no connection to this order you speak of." Holmes's eyes narrowed, and I noticed his gaze flicker to Langley's right hand, where a fresh bruise marred the knuckles. "Stolen, you say? Curious for a ring of such significance to be lost so carelessly. And this bruise, recent, is it not? A result of an altercation, perhaps?" Langley shifted uncomfortably, his fingers brushing the bruise as if to hide it. "A minor accident, nothing more. I struck my hand on a door frame." "You're grasping at straws, Mr. Holmes." Holmes leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "I assure you, sir, I grasp only what is tangible. Your name, or rather your initials, appear in Hawthorne's ledger, linked to substantial payments. The ring, the bruise, your evident unease. These are not straws, but threads in a web. Tell me, what do you know of the Order of the Triad?" Langley's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor with a sharp crash that drew startled glances from nearby patrons. He rose, his face flushed with a mix of fear and defiance. "I know nothing of any order," he snapped. "You accuse me without evidence, sir. I am a respectable man, and I will not be hounded by your insinuations." Holmes remained calm, his fingers steepled. "Very well, Mr. Langley. But know this. The truth has a way of surfacing, and those who hide it often find themselves entangled. Good day." As we left the club, the clink of glasses and murmur of voices faded behind us, replaced by the muffled sounds of the street, hooves on cobblestones, the cry of a newsboy, the distant wail of a foghorn. Holmes walked in silence, his expression thoughtful. "A red herring, Watson," he said at last, his voice barely audible over the city's hum. "Langley is hiding something, but he is not our killer. The bruise suggests he has been coerced, perhaps threatened by the order." The origin of the cigar stub found at the tavern. The shop was a small, fragrant haven, its shelves lined with jars of tobacco and boxes of cigars, the air heavy with the rich scent of Virginia leaf and Havana blends. The proprietor, a wiry man with a keen eye, examined the cigar band with interest. "This is a rare one," he said, peering through a magnifying glass. "A Cuban blend, custom made for a private client. I sold a box to a gentleman named Crane last month, a tall fellow, bearded with a limp." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Did this Mr. Crane give an address or any other details?" The tobacconist shook his head. "Paid in cash, no questions asked. But he mentioned something about a meeting in Spitalfields. Said he needed the cigars for associates. Seemed in a hurry." Holmes thanked the man and slipped him a coin, his mind clearly racing. As we stepped back into the street, he turned to me, his voice low. "Crane again, Watson. The cigar, the ring, the warehouse, all roads lead to him. He is either the killer or a key figure in the order. We must return to Spitalfields and search the warehouse by daylight, for I suspect we missed something in our haste last night." The journey back to Spitalfields was a tense one, the fog thinning but the air still heavy with damp. The warehouse stood as we had left it, its boarded windows and chained door a silent challenge. Holmes picked the lock once more and we entered, the daylight filtering through cracks in the boards to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. The crates and barrels were unchanged, but Holmes's keen eyes spotted a new detail. A hidden trapdoor beneath a pile of sacks, its edges barely visible in the dust. He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Careful, Watson," he said, his lantern casting a flickering light down the steps. "This may be a trap, or it may be the Order's lair." We descended cautiously, the air growing colder and damper with each step. At the bottom was a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves holding ledgers, maps, and a collection of silver-rimmed. "Chamber confirms the Order's reach. We are closing in." Back at 221B, as the fire warmed our chilled bones, I recorded the day's events, my mind heavy with the realization that we had been led astray. Langley was a distraction, the ring a false trail, but the name Crane and the hidden chamber were steps toward the truth. Holmes paced, his eyes distant. "The Order plays a clever game," he said, "but their arrogance will undo them. Tomorrow, we seek Crane, and with him, the heart of this conspiracy." The cozy glow of our rooms felt at odds with the danger we faced, but I took comfort in Holmes's resolve. The game was indeed afoot, and though the trail had faltered, I knew he would find the path again. Chapter 7. The Widow's Tale. The late afternoon light cast a somber glow over Bloomsbury, as Sherlock Holmes and I approached the modest yet elegant home of the late Edward Hawthorne. The fog that had plagued London for days had lifted slightly, revealing the orderly rows of Georgian houses, their windows glinting like watchful eyes. The events of the past days, the chase through Whitechapel, the discovery of the Order's hidden chamber, and the false trail of Charles Langley had left me weary. Yet Holmes's relentless energy drove us forward. Our latest lead was Mrs. Eleanor Hawthorne, Edward's widow, who might hold the key to unraveling the mystery of her husband's murder and the enigmatic Crane, whose name haunted our investigation. The house was a picture of restrained wealth, its facade adorned with ivy and its brass knocker polished to a gleam. A maid, her eyes red from recent tears, admitted us into a parlor furnished with quiet dignity. The room was heavy with the scent of beeswax and lavender, and a grandfather clock ticked solemnly in the corner, its rhythm a stark reminder of time's unyielding march. Mrs. Hawthorne awaited us, seated by a window where the curtains stirred faintly in the draught. She was a woman of perhaps 40, her dark hair streaked with premature gray, her face pale and drawn with grief. She wore mourning black, and her hands clutched a lace handkerchief, its edges frayed. Keen. Tell us everything, Mrs. Hawthorne. His habits, his fears, any change in his demeanor in the weeks before his death. Even the smallest detail may prove vital. She drew a shuddering breath, her gaze drifting to the window where the fading light cast long shadows across the room. Edward was always meticulous, a man of routine. He rose early, worked late at the city bank, and returned home to read or write in his study. But in the past month, he changed. He grew anxious, distracted. He would lock himself in his study for hours, and I heard him pacing at night, muttering about debts and promises broken. Once, I overheard him say, "CL will not relent." I thought it a business matter, but now... Holmes's fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. This CL. Did he ever mention a name, a description, anything to identify this person? Mrs. Hawthorne shook her head, a tear escaping to trace a path down her cheek. No, but he was afraid. He spoke of a burden from his youth, something he could not escape. I pressed him once and he grew angry, not with me but with himself. He said, "I should have faced it long ago, Eleanor, but now it's too late." I felt a pang of sympathy, noting the pain in her voice. "Did he leave anything behind?" I asked gently. "Papers, letters, anything that might shed light on this burden." She hesitated, then rose and crossed to a small writing desk. From a locked drawer she produced a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, and a small photograph in a silver frame. "These were in his study," she said, her voice breaking. "I found them after his death. I haven't had the heart to read them, but perhaps they will help." Holmes took the letters, his fingers deftly untying the ribbon. The paper was of fine quality, similar to the letter we had found in Edward's safe, and one bore the triangle within a circle seal. He opened it, reading aloud in a low voice. I exchanged a glance with Holmes, my mind racing to the name Crane and the initials CL. "This man," I said. "Did Edward give his name?" Mrs. Hawthorne nodded, her hands trembling as she handed Holmes the photograph. "He called himself Thomas Crane. Edward kept this picture, though he hid it from me. I found it among his things." The photograph showed a young man, perhaps 30, with sharp features and a faint scar across his brow. His wrist, visible where his sleeve pulled back, bore a tattoo, the triangle within a circle. Holmes's eyes narrowed as he studied the image, his fingers tracing the symbol. "Thomas Crane," he murmured. "Our cloaked man, perhaps, and likely CL. The pieces begin to align, Watson." Mrs. Hawthorne's voice broke into a sob. "Edward feared for his life. He said this man, this Crane, was not acting alone. He spoke of an order that held power over him, that threatened to ruin us both if he did not comply. I begged him to go to the police, but he refused, saying it would only bring shame upon us." Holmes placed the photograph on the table, his expression grave. "Mrs. Hawthorne, your husband was ensnared by a ruthless organization. The Order of the Triad used his past to extort him, and when he resisted, they struck. This photograph is invaluable. It confirms Crane's identity and his connection to the order. I studied the image, the young man's cold eyes seeming to stare back at me. Could Crane be the killer? I asked, my voice low. Holmes's gaze was distant, his mind weaving the threads of evidence. Possibly, though I suspect he is a tool, not the mastermind. The precision of Edward's wound suggests a killer with surgical skill, and Crane's background is unknown. But his tattoo, his demands, his presence in Whitechapel, all point to a central role in this conspiracy. Mrs. Hawthorne wiped her eyes, her voice steadier now. I want justice for Edward, Mr. Holmes. If this Crane or his order took him from me, I want them. Heart was heavy with the widow's grief. And the tattoo? It links Crane to the order. But what does it signify? A badge of allegiance, Holmes replied. Or a mark of servitude. The triangle within a circle may symbolize unity, power, or even something occult. We must learn more of this order's aims. Tomorrow, we shall seek Crane himself, perhaps through the tobacconist or the warehouse. But we must be cautious. The order will not tolerate our interference. As the cab rattled toward Baker Street, the city seemed to close in around us, its shadows deeper in the gathering dusk. The cozy sanctuary of 221B awaited, but I knew our work was far from done. The photograph of Thomas Crane with his cold eyes and ominous tattoo burned in my mind, a reminder of the danger we faced. Holmes, however, seemed invigorated, his resolve unshaken by the order's menace. Back in our rooms, as the fire crackled and the familiar clutter enveloped us, I took up my notebook, recording Mrs. Hawthorne's tale. The widow's sorrow, the photograph, the letters, all were pieces of a puzzle that grew ever more complex. Yet with Holmes at my side, I felt a flicker of hope that we would unravel the order's secrets and bring justice to the banker's memory. Chapter 8. The Trap is Set. The midnight hour in Whitechapel was a time when the fog seemed to take on a life of its own, swirling through the alleys like a restless spirit, cloaking the world in uncertainty. Sherlock Holmes and I stood in the shadows of a narrow courtyard off Commercial Street, our breath visible in the chill air, our senses heightened by the anticipation of the trap we had set. The revelations of the past days, the ledger's secrets, the photograph of Thomas Crane, and Mrs. Hawthorne's tale of her husband's illegitimate son had brought us to this moment. The Order of the Triad, with its ominous symbol and ruthless machinations, loomed ever larger, and Holmes was determined to draw its agents into the open. The plan was as audacious as it was perilous. Holmes had instructed Inspector Lestrade to spread word through his network of informants that a new ledger had been found in Edward Hawthorne's safe, one containing damning evidence against the handful of trusted constables in the surrounding streets, concealed in doorways and behind barrels, ready to spring the trap. I stood beside Holmes, my revolver heavy in my pocket, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. Holmes, as ever, was the picture of calm intensity. His lean figure was barely visible in the fog, his eyes scanning the darkness with the precision of a hawk. "Patience, Watson," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "The Order is cautious, but their greed for control will draw them out. The ledger is their Achilles' heel, a record of their crimes they cannot allow to surface." I nodded, though the oppressive silence of the courtyard set my nerves on edge. "And if Crane himself appears?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What then?" Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then we shall have our man, or at least a piece of the puzzle. but I suspect Crane is no lone actor. The order's reach is wide, and he may be but a pawn in their game. We waited, the minutes stretching into an eternity. The fog seemed to thicken, muffling even the faint sounds of the city. My thoughts drifted to Mrs. Hawthorne's tear-streaked face, to the photograph of Thomas Crane with his cold eyes and ominous tattoo, and to the ledger's cryptic entries. The order of the triad was a shadow cast over London, its motive still unclear. Financial gain, ideological zeal, or something darker. Holmes's plan was a gamble, but his confidence gave me courage. At last a faint sound broke the silence. The scuff of a boot on cobblestones, followed by the creak of a gate at the courtyard's edge. I tensed, my hand tightening on my revolver, but Holmes's grip on my arm stayed me. "Wait," he breathed. "Let him come closer." A figure emerged from the fog, tall and cloaked, his movements marked by a distinct limp. The dim light of the gas lamp caught the edge of a beard and the glint of a tattoo on his wrist. The triangle within a bearded face, scarred and hardened by years of bitterness. His eyes, the same cold eyes from the photograph, glared at us with defiance. "You know nothing, Holmes," he spat, his voice rough but educated. "The order is beyond your reach." Lestrade's men bound his wrists, and Holmes stepped back, his expression unreadable. "We shall see about that, Mr. Crane. Your tattoo, your presence here, your connection to Edward Hawthorne, all point to your role in his murder. Speak, and you may yet mitigate your fate." Crane laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the courtyard. "You think me the killer? You're chasing shadows, Holmes. The order's will is unbreakable, and I am but one of its servants." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly racing. "Then who is C.L.? Who carved the symbol into Hawthorne's palm?" Crane's lips tightened, and he said no more. His silence a wall as impenetrable as the fog. Lestrade signaled his men to take him away, and the clatter of their boots faded into the night. Holmes stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the spot where Crane had stood, the knife still glinting on the cobblestones. "A partial victory, Watson," he said at last, his voice low. "Crane is in custody, but his words confirm my suspicions. He is not the mastermind, nor likely the killer. The precision of Hawthorne's wound suggests a hand steadier than his. A surgeon's hand, perhaps. Crane is a tool, a messenger sent to retrieve the ledger." I holstered my revolver, my heart still racing from the confrontation. "But the trap worked, Holmes. We have him. Surely he'll talk under questioning." Holmes shook his head, retrieving the knife and examining it under his lantern. "He may, but the order is cunning. They will have prepared for such an eventuality. This knife, note the blade, finely honed, likely imported. It could have made the cut that killed Hawthorne. But Crane's hands are calloused, not those of a surgeon. We must look higher in the order's hierarchy." We returned to the courtyard center, notebook open, recording the night's events, the tense wait, the sudden violence, Crane's defiant silence. Holmes paced, the knife and the silver ring laid out on the table beside the ledger and photograph. "Crane is a link, Watson," he said, pausing by the window. "But not the chain's end. The order's structure is hierarchical, with layers of secrecy. Crane's tattoo, his role in the warehouse, his presence tonight, all suggest he is an enforcer, not a leader. The true CL may be another, or the initials may be a cipher for something else entirely. I frowned, my pen pausing. But Mrs. Hawthorne confirmed Crane as CL, didn't she? The photograph, the blackmail. Holmes nodded, his eyes distant. She did, but the order thrives on deception. Crane may have used the initials to obscure his identity, or they may belong to another. We must interrogate him, but I suspect he will reveal little. The order's loyalty is forged in fear. As the clock struck 1, its chime echoing through the room, I felt the weight of our task. The trap had caught a piece of the puzzle, but the larger picture remained shrouded. Holmes, however, seemed undeterred, his mind already planning the next move. "Tomorrow we visit Crane in custody," he said, "and we must re-examine the evidence, the knife, the ring, the ledger. The order's secrets are within our grasp, Watson, if we can but find the key." I nodded, taking comfort in the cozy glow of our rooms, though the specter of the order loomed large. The game was far from over, and as I penned the final lines of the night's account, I knew that Holmes would not rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The early morning air in Whitechapel was sharp with the bite of November, the fog thinning to reveal the grim outlines of tenements and gas lamps still flickering in the pre-dawn gloom. Sherlock Holmes and I made our way to the Whitechapel police station, where Thomas Crane, the cloaked figure we had apprehended in our trap the previous night, awaited interrogation. Lestrade. Men like Crane are bound by fear or loyalty, but both can be broken with the right leverage. We entered a stark interrogation room, its walls stained with damp and its single window barred against the outside world. Thomas Crane sat at a rough wooden table, his wrists bound in irons, his bearded face set in a scowl. The photograph Mrs. Hawthorne had given us had not lied. His features were sharp, his eyes cold and defiant, though a faint scar across his brow and a surgical scar on his right hand caught my attention. His cloak was gone, revealing a worn but well-tailored coat, and the triangle within a circle tattoo on his wrist gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Holmes took the chair opposite Crane, his movements deliberate, while I stood by the door, my revolver a comforting weight in my pocket. Lestrade lingered nearby, his notebook ready. The air was thick with tension, the clank of Crane's chains echoing as he shifted in his seat. "Mr. Thomas Crane," Holmes began, his voice calm but commanding, "you stand accused of involvement in the murder of Edward Hawthorne, your father. The evidence is compelling. Your tattoo, your presence in Whitechapel, your pursuit of the ledger. Speak now and you may yet mitigate your fate." Crane's lips curled into a sneer, though his eyes flickered with unease. "You've got nothing, Holmes. I'm no murderer. I was in that courtyard for my own reasons, not to kill anyone." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Your reasons, Mr. Crane, are tied to the Order of the Triad. The ring we found, inscribed with loyalty to the Order. Your tattoo. The payments marked CL in your father's ledger, all point to you. And this." He gestured to the surgical scar on Crane's hand. "You were trained as a surgeon, were you not?" The cut on Edward Hawthorne's throat was precise, professional. A surgeon's hand, not that of a common thug. Crane's face paled, and his chained hands clenched. "I studied medicine years ago, yes, but I never practiced. I'm no killer, Holmes. You're barking up the wrong tree." I exchanged a glance with Lestrade, my mind racing. "I never laid a hand on him." Holmes's fingers steepled, his gaze unrelenting. "The Order, you say? Who leads them? Who is CL if not you? Crane hesitated, his eyes darting to the barred window as if seeking escape. I don't know their names, he said at last, his voice low. They don't work like that. The order is shadows, whispers. I got my orders through letters, meetings in dark alleys. The tattoo marks us, binds us, but only the inner circle knows the truth. I felt a chill, the room's damp walls seeming to close in. And the symbol carved into your father's hand, I asked, unable to stay silent. Was that your doing? Crane shook his head, his chains rattling. No. That was their warning, to me, to others. They knew I was his son. When I pushed too hard, they killed him to keep me in line. I'm as much a victim as he was. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he leaned back, his voice cold. A victim who blackmailed his father, who wore the order's mark, who fled when we pursued. Your story is convenient, Mr. Crane, but it lacks conviction. The knife we found in the courtyard, finely honed, a surgeon's tool. Can you deny it was yours? Crane's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. Holmes rose, pacing the small room, his shadow flickering on the walls. You are protecting someone or something, he said. The order's hold is strong, but not unbreakable. Tell us who gave the order to kill Edward Hawthorne, and we may yet spare you the gallows. Crane's defiance faltered, and for a moment I thought he would break. But then he straightened, his eyes hardening. You'll get nothing from me, Holmes. The order sees all, knows all. You think you've trapped me, but you're the ones in danger. Lestrade snorted, scribbling in his notebook. Bold words for a man in chains. We'll see how you feel after a night in the cells. Holmes signaled for us to leave, his expression unreadable. As we stepped into the corridor, the purpose. We returned to the evidence, Lestrade. The knife, the ring, the ledger. All must be re-examined. Crane's scar confirms his surgical training, but we need proof of his actions that night. And we must find the order's inner circle. They are the true architects of this crime. As we walked to our cab, I reflected on Crane's words. The order sees all, knows all. They sent a shiver down my spine, not for their bravado, but for the certainty behind them. The order was a shadow cast over London, its reach extending from Whitechapel's alleys to the city's banks. Crane was in custody, but the true killer, or killers, remained at large. In the cab, Holmes sat in silence, his mind clearly racing. Crane's denial is a thread, Watson, he said at last. He admits to blackmail, but not murder. If he speaks the truth, someone else wielded the knife. Someone with access to Hawthorne. Someone trusted or unseen. We must revisit Mrs. Hawthorne, the bank, perhaps even Langley. The order's web is wide, but it has weak points. Back at 221B, the cozy glow of the fire and the familiar clutter of our rooms offered a brief respite from the tension of the night. I took up my notebook, recording the confrontation with Crane, his defiant words, and Holmes's unyielding pursuit of the truth. The surgical scar, the tattoo, the knife. All were pieces of a puzzle that grew clearer yet more complex with each revelation. Holmes stood by the window, gazing out at the awakening city. The order underestimated us, Watson, he said, his voice low. They thought to scare us with symbols and shadows. But we are closing in. Crane is a crack in their armor, and we shall widen it. I nodded, my pen scratching across the page, though my heart was heavy, with the knowledge that our work was far from done. The confrontation had brought us closer to the truth, but the order's shadow loomed large, and I feared what we might face in the final reckoning. Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. The evening fire in 221B Baker Street cast a warm with loyalty to the order. The green silk fragment, the cigar stub, the knife from the courtyard, and the photograph of Thomas Crane, his cold eyes staring up at us. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, and I knew Holmes had been turning them over in his mind, seeking the pattern that would reveal the truth. "Watson," Holmes began, setting his pipe down and turning to face me. "This case has been a study in deception, a web spun by the order of the triad to obscure their crimes. But the truth, like all truths, cannot remain hidden forever. Let us unravel the mystery of Edward Hawthorne's death, step by step." I leaned forward, my pen poised as Holmes began his explanation. Edward Hawthorne, a respected banker, was found murdered in a Whitechapel alley, his throat cut with surgical precision and a triangle within a circle symbol carved into his palm. The police, led by Lestrade, assumed a random act of violence, perhaps linked to the notorious Whitechapel murders. But the evidence told a different story. He picked up the ledger, its worn leather cover glinting in the firelight. This ledger revealed payments to CL, sums far exceeding Hawthorne's personal wealth, accompanied by cryptic annotations suggesting blackmail. The decoded cipher pointed to a meeting in Spitalfields the night before his death, arranged by this CL. Mrs. Hawthorne's testimony confirmed that CL was Thomas Crane, Edward's illegitimate son, who had resurfaced to extort his father using the secret of his birth. Holmes paused, his fingers tracing the triangle and circle symbol on the letter. Crane, as we learned, was a member of the Order of the Triad, marked by the tattoo on his wrist. His surgical training, evidenced by the scar on his hand, made him a plausible suspect for the murder, given the precision of the wound. Yet his vehement denial during our confrontation, coupled with his fear of the order, suggested he was not the mastermind. I nodded, recalling Crane's defiant words in the police station. But if not Crane, then who? The order's leader? Warehouse revealed the order's reach, with its roster of names including Hawthorne and Charles Langley. I frowned, the pieces falling into place but still incomplete. Langley was a red herring, you said. But what of Crane's role? He admitted to blackmailing his father. Holmes nodded, picking up the knife from the courtyard. Crane was a tool, driven by resentment and greed. He blackmailed Hawthorne, using his illegitimacy as leverage, under the order's direction. But when Hawthorne refused further payments, the order acted to silence him. The surgical precision of the wound suggests a killer with medical expertise. And while Crane had such training, his calloused hands and nervous demeanor marked him as an enforcer, not the executioner. He paced the room, his voice steady but intense. The true killer was someone higher in the order, someone with access to Hawthorne and the skill to wield a blade with such accuracy. The symbol carved into Hawthorne's palm was not Crane's doing, but a message from the order's inner circle, a warning to others who might defy them. Crane's fear during our interrogation confirmed this. He is a pawn, bound by loyalty or terror to protect his masters. I leaned back, my mind racing. Then who is the leader? And why target Hawthorne specifically? Holmes stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on the photograph of Crane. Hawthorne was targeted because he was a weak link. His wealth and position made him valuable, but his conscience, or perhaps his fear of exposure, made him a liability. The order used Crane to pressure him, but when he threatened to expose their financial schemes, they eliminated him. The leader, I suspect, is someone within the city's elite, hidden behind a veneer of respectability. The initials CL may be a misdirection, or they may point to another figure we have yet to uncover. He turned to the window, the starry sky a stark contrast to the fog that had dominated our investigation. The trap we set in the courtyard was a calculated risk. By spreading word of a new ledger, we forced the order to sharp angles across his face, a reminder of the relentless hunter within the scholar. I felt a quiet satisfaction in our progress, yet a lingering unease at the order's unseen reach. The cozy warmth of 221B, with its clinking teacups and ticking clock, felt like a fragile sanctuary against the darkness we had uncovered. Greed, Watson, Holmes continued, his voice softening, is a poison that blinds even the cleverest minds. Edward Hawthorne was ensnared by his past, Crane by his bitterness, and the order by their lust for power. Yet it is our duty to shine a light into such darkness, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I nodded, my thoughts turning to Mrs. Hawthorne's grief and the fragility of family bonds. There's a lesson here, isn't there? I said. Secrets, when left to fester, breed betrayal and ruin. Honesty, painful as it may be, might have saved Hawthorne. Holmes's eyes met mine, a rare flicker of warmth in their depths. Well said, old friend. The truth is a harsh master, but a just one. Edward Hawthorne paid the ultimate price for his silence, and we must ensure his death was not in vain. As the clock struck 9, its chime echoing through the room, I closed my notebook, the weight of the case settling over me. The mystery of the banker's death was solved, yet the larger shadow of the order loomed. Holmes vowed to pursue them, and I knew he would not rest until their secrets were laid bare. Outside, the fog had lifted completely, revealing a sky studded with stars. Holmes gazed out the window, his silhouette framed against the night, and I sensed his mind was already turning to the next challenge. For my part, I felt a quiet pride in our work, tempered by the knowledge that London's shadows would always hold new mysteries. As I sipped my tea, the fire's warmth enveloping me, I reflected on the moral of this tale, that secrets, like wounds, must be cleansed to heal. Holmes's deduction had brought justice to Edward Hawthorne, but the order's web remained, a reminder that our battle